Israel's actions have been enabled by the pro-Israel lobby, which has operated in the US for many decades. In 2016 and 17, American journalist Clayton Swisher produced an investigative report about this lobby for the Al Jazeera news network. The report included footage obtained by British undercover reporter Tony Kleinfeld, who infiltrated several pro-Israel organizations. When Israel partisans in the US learned of the film, they successfully pressured Al Jazeera not to broadcast it. Eventually, the documentary was leaked, and its explosive information became public. Despite the significance of its content, US media failed to tell Americans about it.
In 2005, Palestinian civil rights groups sought a peaceful means to protest against Israel's occupation. They identified goods from Israel and called for their boycott. The BDS movement was born.
We called for boycotting Israel, divesting from it, and eventually imposing sanctions on it, as was done against apartheid South Africa.
The secretive Ministry of Strategic Affairs, based in the Prime Minister's office in Jerusalem, was given a mission: establish a covert campaign to defeat the BDS movement.
Does the war of ideas matter? I don't know. I know that getting $38 billion in security aid to Israel matters, which is what AIPAC just did. That's what I'm proud to have been a part of for so long.
AIPAC's website shows members of Congress attending its conferences and declaring their support for Israel.
And on behalf of Congress, thank you for sending a clear and unequivocal message to the world that the United States stands with Israel now, tomorrow, and always.
What AIPAC does is it makes sure that money is funneled your way if you're seen as pro-Israel, and it'll go to significant lengths to make sure that you stay in office if you continue to be staunchly pro-Israel.
They have questionnaires. Anybody running for Congress is expected to fill out a questionnaire. And they evaluate the depth of your commitment to Israel on the basis of that questionnaire. Then you have an interview with local people. If you get AIPAC support, then more often than not, you're going to win.
You know, Canary Mission is a good example. Canary Mission is highly, highly effective to the extent that we monitor the Students for Justice in Palestine and their allies.
And they're picking out individuals who they think are critical of Israel, and they're smearing them. And they're telling them that what's going to happen here is if you don't cease and desist from acting like this, we in the end will do much to destroy your career.
A few years later, these individuals are applying for jobs within your company.
Canary Mission's promotional video threatens to pass these smears on to prospective employers.
To ensure that today's radicals are not tomorrow's employees. It was shocking.
The research operation is very high tech. When I got here a few years ago, the budget was like $3,000. Today it's like $1.5 million or more. Probably it's like $2 million even at this point. I don't even know. It's huge. It's a massive budget. We've got major political consulting firms on retainer that are here all the time. We have our own opposition researchers. We have a lot of communications capabilities. And what's most interesting about it, I think, is that 90% of the people who pay attention to this space very closely have no idea what we're actually doing, which I like.
Tony discovered that the Israeli government has launched a covert campaign to gather information on American citizens.
We have 3 different sub-campaigns: data gathering, working on activist organization, money trail.
The Israeli official named one organization that was a partner in its covert campaign, the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, or FDD. Jonathan Shanzo works for the FDD. He produces research on the financing of armed groups.
Yeah, I'm very interested in getting involved in BDS activity and stuff like that.
Hopefully anti-BDS.
If you had on tape a senior Russian or Iranian or even Canadian official saying that they were running covert operations to spy on Americans and using an organization like the Foundation for Defense of Democracies as a front group, I think it would be a bombshell.
Think tanks like the FDD play an important role for Israel in the media. Their selective use of evidence is often presented as legitimate academic research.
They try to educate people to understand that Israel is effectively a Western liberal democracy in the sea of terrorist states, which is the Arab world. The other goal is to intimidate and to smear people.
Shanzer is invited by pro-Israel congressmen to provide evidence before subcommittees on terrorism in the Middle East. He uses them to insinuate that prominent activists for Palestinian equal rights are linked to armed groups.
The AMP's founder and president, Hatem Bazian, was one of two featured speakers at a 2004 fundraising dinner in California. Incidentally, the other speaker at this dinner was Mohammed al-Mazain, who is currently in jail for his role in the Holy Land Foundation and for providing financial support to Hamas.
When you enter it into the congressional record, now people are begin to think that there's some legitimacy to it. So this dumping of utter nonsense and garbage into the congressional record, into a legitimate hearing, will have an effect down the line.
Shanzer's allegations that American students are somehow connected to armed groups in the Middle East has become part of the lobby's attempt to demonize BDS.
He used to be like with the press. He's an expert at making their jobs easier. So, for instance, we actually now, when there's a terror attack in Israel, our staff gets to the scene usually before the press does. Just because they are so good. They have bulletproof vests on, they have cameras, and as soon as there's Twitter an attack, we have like 4 guys at the scene.
Breaking news overseas, a shooting in the heart of Tel Aviv.
He has this rapid response team where he has people strategically placed around the country. So if there's an attack, like the Sorona attack in Sorona Market in Tel Aviv.
Clearly an attack on a soft target right now based on all the initial preliminary details we're getting from this very fast developing story.
They take pictures and they get testimonies. By the time the press gets there, we do their jobs well. By the time the press got there, we were able to help affect the narrative because, they're all scrambling. They need to get stuff to their editors immediately on what happened back in Brussels or Washington, and we're able to get them.
The former CNN correspondent, Jim Clancy, first reported on the Middle East in the early 1980s.
Those boundaries. When Chip begins interacting with journalists and suggesting the lines and suggesting the interviews, then it's not journalism anymore, it's just propaganda.
Tony had gathered that the lobby's concern with BDS was not its economic impact, but a much wider threat to the power of the pro-Israel lobby.
The specific potential of an immediate boycott, that's not a problem. What's a bigger problem is the Democratic Party, the Bernie Sanders people, bringing all these anti-Israel people, and the Democratic Party being pro-Israel is less of a bipartisan issue. And then, every time the White House changes, policies towards Israel change, and that becomes a dangerous thing for Israel. There is an actually important battle being fought on the campuses.